I spent the past week loving Hearts of Stone, for a lot of reasons. For starters, it has that unbeatable CDPR value. This $10 expansion is truly an expansion. It took me 12 hours across 4 days before I finally got around to finishing enough side quests to want to top off the main quest. And what a main quest it was! Those 12 hours had some of the best writing in the whole series, to the point where I'm pretty sure I was enjoying this story more than the base game story. For starters, it's more focused. The Witcher 3 suffered from a case of Mass Effect 2 disease, where this cast of great characters were stuck dealing with a not-so-great save-the-world overarching plot where episodic little side quests presented far more interesting situations than the main quest. So lo and behold, we have an expansion with great characters and a great overarching plot. Here, a lower stakes but harder hitting side story, something that feels like an absurdly high production episode of The Witcher, is given the same production values as the main game's main quest, and the result is glorious. It's something that might have taken advantage of the Witcher brand better than any of the mainline products did. I made a big video about the series last year with a few points I want to reiterate here. The Witcher brand of storytelling is, by its nature, episodic, referential, and somewhat classical. It's a universe where pre-existing fairy tales, legends, and myths from our own universe are real, a middle ground between Tolkien and Shrek. With Hearts of Stone, we begin the story with some usual Witcherly jabs at the Frog Prince. This time it's a horrible giant mutant beast that needs to be slain rather than smooched. After one swashbuckling prison boat escape and a few ghastly visits later, you start to get into the stuff that makes Witcher a little more unique. The wedding scenes, which have Geralt possessed by the ghost of a long-dead local aristocrat, resemble an early 1900s Polish play called The Wedding, that sees wedding guests visited by spirits of the past. But before and after that, the story that frames the whole expansion is a dramatic retelling of the Faust legend, an anonymous German tale of a bored scholar who makes a deal with the devil. But the twist that makes Hearts of Stone feel less like video game pulp and more of a genuine Polish cultural export is that the details of this story more closely follow the Polish version of Faust, called Pan Twardowski. In
Pan Twardowski.
The doomed doctor attempts to outwit his contract with the devil by specifying that he'll only give up his soul during a visit to Rome, a clause that the devil ends up outwitting him on by catching him in an inn named Rome. While being dragged down to hell, Twardowski's desperate prayers to God lend him some mercy, and he ends up being stranded on the moon instead. But in another version, a ballad from the 1800s, Twardowski requires the demon to complete 3 seemingly impossible tasks to seal the contract. After managing to complete the first 2, Twardowski is saved when Mephistopheles is unable to complete the 3rd task, spending a year living with Twardowski's wife. In the game, our Faustian figure and the titular Heart of Stone is Olgierd von Everick, a fallen aristocrat who, desperate to reclaim his family's wealth and save his marriage, struck a deal for immortality with the game's version of Mephistopheles, a sinister, omnipotent entity named Gaunter O'Dim. In an attempt to outwit his debt collector, Olgierd specifies that he'll first need 3 impossible tasks fulfilled, and that he'll only give up his soul during a meeting on the moon. The 3 impossible tasks and the significance of the moon are tenuous connections to Twardowski, but what really seals the deal is the look of the character in a 1936 Polish film. Take one look at the hair and the costuming, and it should be clear where the artists of The Witcher got their inspiration from. Olgierd is a dead ringer for the 1936 Twardowski film, but Gaunter O'Dim is a little bit more of an original take on the classic character of Mephistopheles, one whose satanic presence is highlighted not just by the familiar tropes of crossroads and blood contracts, but also by a lot of subtle little hints in the writing you might have missed. He who sups with the devil should have a long spoon, so scenes with Gaunter involve a lot of action with spoons. And then mentions of the devil.
Behave like devils. What, the devil?
After hiring our Witcher Geralt to embark on 3 surreal adventures to fulfill the 3 impossible tasks, and then tricking Olgierd into meeting him on top of a stone relief of the moon, Gaunter's contract is either fulfilled or forgiven, depending on the player's actions. You can assume the fallibility of men and choose not to meddle in the affairs of deities. Afterwards, you can ask for a favor with some kind of unspecified punishment, perhaps coming for Geralt in the future, or stick to a moral imperative and insist against it.
Don't want a thing from you.
Or you can do something that none of the English or German versions of Faust ever managed to do, and that is to outwit the devil himself. Most versions of Faust can be read as a spiritual cautionary tale of a doctor whose preoccupation with natural science over scripture leads to easy temptation by the devil. In the earlier versions of Faust, there's never a happy ending. He always ends up being dragged down to hell or torn up and thrown around the stage. But the two different versions of Christopher Marlowe's Faustus play from the 1600s, commonly referred to as the A version and the B version, were different enough to spark a more recent controversy over whether Faust was willingly selling his own soul or being tricked into it, a difference that some historians think determines how Marlowe felt about a hot historical debate that was still raging in his day: spiritual predestination versus free will. Hundreds of years later, we have this retelling that lets the players participate in that debate by the ending they choose, plus keen writing that makes neither ending feel unsatisfying nor incompatible with today's sensibilities. Faust is a cautionary moral tale written in a time where religious authorities were the highest laws of the land. God, the devil, and at least one named demon all play an active role in the story as real, tangible participants. But after hundreds of years of shrinking the political power of religious institutions, we now have a retelling of this tale that reflects some more updated assumptions.
The wise men of Oxenfurt claim there are no gods. After death, there is only the void. I've known this void already. Death holds no surprises.
Although Olgierd's everlasting soul is at stake by an actual real devil, the alternative is not eternal salvation. Instead, it's non-existence, a concept that sparks an incredible existential fear in at least one of these characters. The ghost of Olgierd's wife is bound to haunt their estate until she finally comes to terms with the oblivion of what's ahead.
And what will happen then? Shall I be free of the suffering, the sadness? Is it the void that awaits?
I don't know.
Which sets us up for the decision at the ending. Olgierd is not a good person, but even after causing lifetimes of suffering, is a never-ending eternity of suffering truly a just punishment? Consider the alternative. The inconsequential painlessness of non-existence would more or less see the same results for those who are left living. Other questions included in just one button prompt here are whether or not his fate should be predestined by this deity, or does he have, or at least deserve, enough free will to take a shot at redemption. High-minded Enlightenment ideals, concepts such as liberty, democracy, tolerance, and constitutional governments, see an individual's pursuit of happiness as more sacred than whatever plans their god or government might have had for them. So the question faced by a player sympathetic to Olgierd's plight is, should he be given the free will to face up to his own problems, or fulfill a contract a deity had planned for him? And given our modern worship of free will, it's notable that the ending that preserves his free will and gives him another shot is the one that the community has collectively called the good ending. Even though forgiving an immortal mass murderer warlord could hardly be construed as an act of good. Instead of picking moral extremes, you're picking what you think is the lesser evil. And in that process, you're also picking personal answers to provocative but simple questions like, is this cruel? Can evil eventually be forgiven? Is it anyone's real right to take another one's life when they're on their knees begging for mercy? Which actually was foreshadowed way earlier in the first act. And that's why I think this expansion pack to this game had some of the smartest writing I've played in years. Not because of its subtle foreshadowing or its density of wordplay clues. Not because it takes sarcastic jabs at fairy tale like The Witcher always has, but because it seems like it's elevating the format of The Witcher to some kind of greater literary purpose. It's a genuine effort by the writers to explore the problems presented by an old morality play and re-examine them for a new age. Forgive the format and the budget, strip away the side quest to focus on its modern-day version of a Polish version of Faust, and you have an effort similar to postmodern retellings like John Gardner's Grendel or Neil Gaiman's The Sleeper and the Spindle. Except this time, it's also a choose-your-own RPG adventure where the player's invited to explore alongside the writers and make their own interpretations of the old tale along the way. And it's also being done within the branding of The Witcher, one of the more festive, funny, thoughtful, and non-combative Western CRPGs out there. It's notable that neither of the two endings here end with any kind of climatic final boss fight, and that the player plays through a 3-hour wedding party scene where nothing goes wrong and nobody dies. Once again, the writers of these games are supremely lucky. For all the problems that video game stories usually have, the format, style, and origins of The Witcher solve a whole lot of them. But it's really their execution on this main story, their retelling of Pan Twidarski, that I fell in love with here. If Hearts of Stone really was an opportunity for a Polish company to re-examine one of their own cultural stories via video games, with room for the player to express their own views on the story along the way, and then export it to the rest of the world, I think that's incredibly cool. I think that's one of the most pure and satisfying uses of video games as a medium in general. Something that's so graceful a concept that it's more surprising that that doesn't happen more often.